we're live.
All right. Welcome back to World's Strongest Opinions, episode 34 with Victoria Long. As you may know, two-time Arnold Pro Strongwoman Champion, 22 and 23. 22 America's Strongest Woman. I know you won the Kaos Classic at 22. Also, lots of accolades in your career thus far. Welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you here.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It was really great when you said yes. I was like, it's nice seeing your deadlift event coming up and everything. We have a good amount to talk about.
Absolutely.
That's huge. You've got a little pressure now to go after that 700.
I do. We're definitely going to try for it, if not more. We'll see. But yeah, I'm excited. I've never done just a world record attempt before. Just so happened at the Arnold, it was, you're doing a deadlift pull. It's just, if you break the record, you break the record. So I've never done training specifically for a world record. So that's new to me. A little different, but for me, I think less stressful because there's not so many things you have to focus on necessarily, just, the one event. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. It makes a big difference. I mean, considering what you pulled at the Arnold was amazing. And that's after the wheel of pain, which I feel like takes 100 pounds most people's deadlifts.
Oh man.
That was brutal. And you still had plenty in the tank. I don't know why. I feel like they should have let you have a fourth attempt. I don't know their system.
It was it was powerlifting rules essentially. So, you pick your three lifts and that's it.
True.
Depending on the federation though, in powerlifting, if you win, a lot of times they'll let you take, especially if it's for a world record, they'll let you take a fourth attempt. Yeah. But I guess maybe you already set the world record, so maybe there wasn't any sense. But
missed opportunity, possibly. There's a lot of people who think it was a missed opportunity on Rogue's part to not let me do a fourth attempt.
Sure.
But here's the thing, we still had other events to do. So, you also have to keep that in mind as you're competing. Okay. I could use up everything here or,
sure.
Just take what I've got and move on. So,
Yeah. And competitions are moving faster these days too. There's schedules, there's time limits. Thankfully, we're all happy about that. So yeah. So that's a very, very valid point. Yeah. Amen to that. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's exciting too, of doing a halftime show. It's interesting just doing the record thing, because I know some people, it's having a full competition, that changes the whole dynamic, whereas being able to just focus on that one lift, it's huge, especially at a fun show like that. Luke Davis is great and everything, so that's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I was actually over in the UK a couple weeks back just to visit a couple friends, Rebecca Roberts and then Claire Myler.
Nice.
And it actually worked out well because I had planned that trip obviously before I committed to doing the world record attempt. And so when the world record attempt came along, I was like, oh, this is perfect. It's my first time traveling abroad and I'm going to the UK to do the attempt. So it's just it was a nice little trip to just kind of see what to expect, because I had never been abroad. And this will be my first time competing abroad too. So that'll be a whole new experience since the sport is, a lot larger over here than it is, or over there, than it is here. So that'll be a cool experience too.
I think they have better crowds over there. I think we have more athletes. I think when it boils down to it, I think the US has a lot more athletes, but it's more popular from a fan perspective in Europe, it seems.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think you're right. It does seem like we have more athletes in the sport. And I don't know why that is. I really don't know.
I have my theories. I have my theories. I think a lot of it is because in the US it's a business, right? It's entertainment. And I think that the way it's grown with both SC and USS is that it's targeted the athletes to bring athletes in as the revenue source. Whereas in Europe, that's not really the case. And so I think I think that would be a fair bet as to why we have so many athletes, because that was the growth that Willie specifically set out to accomplish with USS, was bringing more athletes in. And USS Nationals is proof in the pudding.
Yeah, that contest has been huge, like unbelievably huge. And good on him. I mean, I won't knock him for having a vision and following through on that.
Sure.
But like I was talking to Dennis the other day, and we were talking about the whole pro card system, and I mean that's kind of
Dennis, your husband, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of controversial too. And I think sometimes the sport can be cheapened by doing certain things. And like I said, that's not a dig at Willie or any other promoter or whatever. But I just think sometimes we hand out too much, kind of like when back in the day when bodybuilding was handing out pro cards like crazy.
Sure.
Or they weren't. Initially they weren't, right? It was really hard to get a pro card. And then as time went on, like now you have the first, 3 spots at their national contests are pros, and you don't even know who these pros are. And, so, I mean, for me, sometimes I think the sport gets kind of cheapened, but,
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I've said that before too. I think it gets diluted. And in a sport that's really, I mean, everybody that does well has a good team behind them, right? But it is an individualistic sport, and when you dilute it with a lot of people, it makes the opportunities for the good athletes harder. I mean, especially from a sponsor perspective, it increases the competition there, the exposure, and in big fields like at USS, when you have 500 people out on the field, more or less, it's chaos. And from a sponsorship perspective, your athlete's getting zero exposure. So yeah. I agree with that 100%.
Okay. This is Lily. Come here.
Hey, Lily.
She just wants to play. She doesn't understand that I can't play.
I shut my door so my dog can't come in.
I don't have to do that. She's relentless.
My dog likes to come up in here and just like nuzzle my arm and just shove his face in everything that I'm doing.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of that goes on with 2 Danes. Let me tell you.
Oh, are they Danes? That's awesome. Great Danes.
How old are they? And how much do they weigh?
She is about 11 months and she weighs 120. And her brother's about 4 and he's at like 140. So they're decent size. They're big enough. Let's just say that. Big enough.
Yeah. They're big. That's a big dog.
They can fit in the 148 class.
Okay, let's go out. Dennis, can you come shut the door? Maybe didn't hear me. Anyway.
Yeah. But like you were saying though about the sport, I think it's interesting now that like the pro cards are everywhere and stuff, and like you don't know if they transfer to other leagues now. Ragnarok's doing it, all these things, right. And it's always a little bit complicated because there are no set like rules or standards for lifts like we always talk about on the show, but also for like business operations. Like there's not very good like clear cut like this show will lead to this, here's how you get to like this place and everything. Yeah, I think it's getting a bit better, but I think it's very much like Darren always says, like the bulk of the money comes from athletes. So you're kind of incentivized to have more athletes rather than less athletes in a higher caliber show. Yeah. It's this idea of like so many local shows, the novice classes are always just massive. And then there are open classes that don't have enough people to compete and everything, which makes it strange when you have then of like, at least here in Texas, sometimes you have people wanting to do the novice class because they'll get invites to nationals, and they wouldn't have gotten an invite to nationals if they had done the open class. Which at that point you'd kind of say maybe you shouldn't have a shot at nationals if you couldn't compete against even at a small level show like that tier of athletes. So it's a little bit. It's hard though because it is so much like a new sport, and it's very much like kind of just run like a family business. Of oftentimes it's like it's a very small community, so it's hard trying to figure out what to do. I think sometimes it's nice to have like Rogue stepping up with the Arnold Strongwoman Classic. Like that was run really well.
Agreed.
And stuff like overall a phenomenal show, and giving those things like equal standards. And like Giant Slab had World's Strongest Nation. That was pretty awesome to see. Like, so there are ways forward and stuff. Like what's your experience been like starting from when you got into strongman, and how have you seen it progress?
I guess like I took, when I got started, first of all, I didn't know anything about the sport. I am not one of those competitors who is in love with the history of the sport. Like, when I started doing this, I couldn't tell you who Big Z was because I had no clue. And some people may be like, oh my God, no, I had no clue. I tried it on a whim. My coach and good friend, who still does my coaching, he convinced me after like 4 years to try it. And I just tried it, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's something I enjoy doing. So, I mean, I probably have a little different, of an experience or view on it as I've gone through than some other people. But even when I did nationals, top 3, I think, got their pro card. And even at that level, at that point, I was like, this seems like that's a lot of pro cards being handed out,
For SC though, I think SC's kind of been, so I started competing in strongman in 2008. And I think the number of pro cards that they give away every year is maybe, it's either the same or less, because they used to do satellite Platinum Plus competitions where the winner got a pro card and then the winner of nationals got the pro card. Now the only place to get the pro card is nationals and Arnold.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think that's changed much for SC per se. But now that USS is giving pro cards, and then the shows where they're called pro shows, but they're not technically for pros, I think convolutes what a pro really is. Kind of, back to John's. Well, I think the whole thing of bringing more athletes in has kind of diluted the meaning of pro, and and taking away some of that exposure of the people that are really deserving, such as yourself, who've put in a lot of work and are performing at a very, very high level. It's unfortunate. I don't think, there was probably never any intention for that at the start, right? But yeah, I think we're seeing some of the negative externalities of the success of USS, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. But in the same breath that I say, I thought that 3 pro cards, per class was a lot. I mean, if you had less than that and you want to give pros opportunities, I mean, how do you open up those opportunities when there's not enough pros to do them? But like you said, then you have the pro-ams, right? Where you can be a novice and jump in and compete against a pro. So it's just, I think for me, it's maybe been a little confusing too, so I mean,
there's never been a really defined direction that things are going. They just kind of branch off and new things pop up, and it is confusing. Trying to explain strongman to somebody that is not in strongman is sometimes extremely hard, or even new people trying to understand where do I go? Where do I start? Where's the next step? Well, it's a very convoluted path.
Yeah, it is for sure. And I was very blessed. Like I said, my friend and good friend and coach, he had been in the sport for several years. So I was blessed to have his knowledge in, just what direction should I take. And the direction I took was somewhat traditional. I mean, I did a nationals qualifying show. I won nationals, qualified for the Arnold Amateur. And I ended up, getting invited to the Pro Amateur 2022, so I guess my path was a little bit more traditional than some people. But as far as like how the sport's changed, like even in the short amount of time that I've done it, and I've only done it for going on 4 years now. Like last year when Rogue took over, or this year when Rogue took over the women's pro, at the Arnold, the Pro Strong Women show was huge. I mean, and it was very noticeable, not only to us as athletes, but to, the spectators as well. Just in the way it was ran. I mean, it was like down to timing and just the way we were treated. Like hotel was paid for, airfare was paid for. We got like all these clothes, jacket, so, and that's nothing on like Dion, when Dion was doing it, because you can only put so much into a show if you have the backing, and the sponsors and stuff like that. So again, that's nothing on her. But I mean, there was, like I said, a noticeable difference. And just the fact that Rogue was willing to do that and willing to take it on, because it's a gamble. Anytime anytime you put your money into something that is a first of its kind, it's going to be a gamble. So,
sure.
Just the fact that they did that, and hopefully, I'm assuming they'll do the same thing next year and continue to increase the prize money. Because from the feedback that I've heard, a lot of people enjoyed watching the women's show more than they enjoyed watching the men's show. So it's moving in a good direction. for women. But there's still obviously a ways to go, when it comes to that. And that's a topic that we can talk to or blue in the face on. Right.
The most important thing, in my opinion, is that we have got to get people to watch.
Yes.
That's what keeps the money in it. And that's what keeps Rogue in it. Because there's been numerous organizations that have come and gone since the beginning of the sport. I mean, through the 80s, 90s, 2000s. And the number one reason I think that they didn't stick around is a failure to draw the crowds and keep the sponsorship money in it. And that's, I've always been the opposite. I've argued against the growth, from the athlete perspective. It's like, yeah, it's great to have more athletes because, they're going to buy the equipment and stuff, but true growth is in growing the viewership, the audience, because that's where the sponsors get their ROI and they keep putting money into the sport, which is at the end of the day is best for the athletes.
Right. And there's a return. There's essentially a return on it when, for that company or whoever's putting up the money, a return on their investment, essentially.
Exactly.
So they look at it as a business venture, so to speak, I guess. So yeah, you're right. I mean, we need the support. We need the support from people who are, going to watch and come and to the shows. And so, I mean,
that's what we push here all the time. That's like one of our number one topics is we not only need to support each other as athletes, we need to be helping each other grow the exposure as well on social media. I'm terrible with social media, so I'm probably going to sound a little bit like a hypocrite here, but because I try to avoid social media a bit, but I try as best as I can. I think if athletes come together and start helping each other, just sharing each other's posts, commenting, liking, right, helping that exposure over the long run is going to be a big positive for the sport and the athletes themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I'm with you. I'm terrible. I'm terrible at social media. I've never been a fan. And God bless Cerberus for, for putting up with me in the one post I managed to squeeze out every week. And I'm supportive of like my fellow athletes, and it may not seem that way because I don't like reshare their stuff and I don't necessarily comment. But like I've said before in previous like podcasts that I've done, that's for my own mental space.
Sure.
I may personally message them and say, hey, good luck, whatever, and just have a small conversation with them. But that's, like I said, that's for me. I don't need to be watching everybody else, what they're doing good. I don't need to, so
that's
I guess
fair.
I'm a hypocrite in that sense too.
That's fair. I mean, because there's always that one competitor that's going to go just like blast everything they have 3 weeks out from competition and post it online, and everybody's gonna be like, oh my God, they're gonna win this event, and then they bomb it. Right?
Yeah. People will only see what you want them to see. That's the other thing.
Exactly.
So
the only thing that matters is competition day.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. And that showed at the Arnold.
Yeah.
Clearly for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've just been a dominating force, though, for the past 4 years. When you're like, well, I've been doing it about 4 years, and it's like you've been at the top level of like every show for the past few years now. And I think that does show. And when you say the social media thing, it's nice having this podcast because it kind of creates a layer of abstraction. So I can just have my personal page doing more personal stuff and like then treat this as more of a business page and stuff, because it does, like, it's a lot, like it takes a lot of mental bandwidth if people are commenting and replying to things, and like your feed gets really cluttered, especially if like we've talked about it on the show of like realistically people have trouble managing more than like 150 connections max because like we're tribal creatures, and now you have 5,000 people who are all commenting and interacting with things all the time. You're like,
yeah,
that's too much energy. Like, hopefully you can get to the point where you have a social media person. Yeah, like just have a social media intern.
Yeah,
Darren has me doing this channel, so that's always good.
Yeah, I don't have the bandwidth, honestly. I'm one of those people like I'll I'll go looking for somebody that I swear I just talked to, and it's like 50 lines down, like under like all these. I'm like, have I really talked to that many people? And like the last time I talked to this other person, I'm just like, I spend way too much time just chatting. So
it will just suck up your time and your energy.
Yeah, and if you're a serious athlete, I mean, your time is valuable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, right. Your time is valuable, and especially when you have another full-time job. Like that's the other thing that, you know, I've had people message me and, you know, like apologize for messaging me because I must be so busy, like with competing. And I'm like, no, I'm actually busy with this thing called a full-time job that provides me benefits and a retirement. And, you know, so that's the other thing. I've always viewed this sport, even after the whole going pro and doing, you know, larger contests and whatever, as a hobby. And some people might take offense to that. Other pros might take offense to that. Actually, I know there's one specifically that does. But you know, that's what I've chosen. And I've chosen because this sport is not, for me, there's not longevity in this sport. Like, yes, you have the anomalies. You have the Mark Felixes who can do it for 20 years.
Right.
You know, and make essentially a full career out of it.
No, he still has a full-time job. He always has.
But you know what I mean? Like some people choose to go that route and this is what they do, and that's fine. And I respect that. And I mean, good on you. But for me, I don't want to constantly be chasing a paycheck, you know what I mean? And for me, that's what it would be. It would be chasing a paycheck, whether it be with clients and staying up on that and sponsorships and this, that, or the other. So and that's what it'll always be for me. And so it's probably why I'm partially more selective on the contests that I do. And you don't see me doing, you know, 5-6 contests a year, you know, because of that. It's not my full-time career, and because I like to give my body the time to recover and all that good jazz. But yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's a fun hobby.
It is. It's funny you say that some people may take offense to it being called a hobby, because I say a lot of times too that even the term pro, and no offense, isn't really true in strongman either, because the definition of a professional is making a living from your profession, right? And very, very few people are able to really truly do that in the sport of strongman.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, the percentage is so low for you to have that, like something. It's not just about being good. I mean, it's about, you know, having that something that's marketable to companies who are going to put you on their full-time payroll.
Right.
And again, going back to social media, part of that's social media, and you know, so kudos to those people, and I'm happy for them. But it's not a feasible thing for me. So I'll enjoy it while I'm able to enjoy it, and while I'm able to still be competitive and stay free of injury, knock on wood. You know, but when that time comes, then I hang it up and that's done, you know? So
yeah, fair enough. I mean, like, at least you have realistic expectations and a realistic perspective of the sport. I mean, that says a lot.
Yeah. And I think you have to, you know, you know, like my husband has been doing it. He started a little late. He started at like 42, and he's going to be 54 this year. And, you know, he'll probably do a couple more contests, but I mean, even he'll tell you just, you know, the breakdown of his body. And
sure.
I mean, it's just, like I said, while it's happening, and while we're in this, you know, for me, this good period where I'm, you know, on top and able to still be competitive, great. But
yeah.
And it's smart though. I mean, this job, like, for one, it's not like a traditional job, because like I assume Rogue's not like giving you retirement money based off the shows you do, and like they will help out with like hospital bills and stuff, but like that's also why you have to be selective about the shows you do, because like blowing out your knee at a low level show that doesn't have health coverage or anything, like Darren and I always talk about, like the indemnity waivers seem to cover almost anything. Like you can be strapped in a Hercules hold and have it almost kill you, and it's like, well, you signed a waiver, like.
Yep.
So
well, I don't think that's true.
That's true.
I don't think it really would cover it. I think people are confused at what it actually waives.
Yeah.
I think negligence. I think there's still a a case for negligence, regardless of whatever waiver you sign.
But it is like, I think it's important to have like those realistic expectations and stuff. And I think for a lot of young people, I think like if they start getting money at contests, it seems like a lot of money. But like if you have a career and things that like other bills and stuff you have to think about, like realistically, most people couldn't live off their winnings for
Well,
like
right.
years and years.
Yeah.
Like it's nowhere even close.
Yeah. And I've had people, you know, I won WSW last year and that was 25 grand. This year, first place for us was 25 grand. And I've had people say, man, you just won 50 grand in like 4 months. I was like, yeah, but guess what? I have to pay taxes on that 50 grand. Like
20,000 of that's already gone to the government. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
so
man.
it's, like I said, it's nice little, you know, it's savings money or emergency money or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but there's
but it's not mortgage money. Like it's not. It's one of those things that won't cover all the bills. Money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the part that always gets me is like the fact that you have to pay taxes on that. Because I think in people's minds they're like, oh, the promoter or whoever, they pay taxes and like that's what you're getting afterwards. It's like, no, when Rogue gives people at the Rogue Invitational 200 grand, you're not seeing 200 grand.
And you're not paying W-2 taxes. You're paying 1099 taxes. So you're paying all of your FICA taxes. Everything your employer would be paying for you, you're paying on top of it. So you're taxed heavier on it.
Yep, they're definitely having you sign those forms before the contest. Yeah, they'll get their fingers in it.
Yeah, sure. So it is like, I think it's what you have is a sustainable and realistic approach of those things. Like, yeah, 50 grand sounds like a lot, but then it's like, if that's all you had, that doesn't go very far in like the world.
It sounds like a lot though in strongman because there's not very much to begin with. Because I mean, winning $50,000, you're one of a very select few that have won that kind of money in strongman. I mean, there's a lot of pros that have been pushing really hard for many years that have never made that much money, right?
Yeah.
So it does sound like a lot, but the reality is that, you know, we're talking about a sport that has been around a long time and it still has a long way to mature to be amongst other professional sports as far as how well athletes are compensated.
Yes, absolutely. And if you just look at like from year to year, so, you know, 2022, let me get my years right. 2022. Yes. You know, like, or ASW 21, I think I made like 3 grand. Fast forward to 2022 and I made 25 grand. So, you know, in the Arnold 2022 Arnold was 10, 2023 Arnold was 25. So that's even amazing. In that short amount of time. But I think in that 1 year, the jump that I made in that 1 year is like 15 years worth of the work that women have put into the sport. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Before that, America's, I think, gave $1,000 for years.
Yeah.
For years. That's all it was. $1,000 bucks.
So, you know, I'm, I guess, fortunate to be in it in this time where that switch is starting to happen. You know, and of course I'm grateful for that. And it's cool to be a part of, you know, and hopefully it continues on that path. But like you said, we need the support. Bottom line, we need the support because companies and sponsors aren't going to keep pumping money into something that they're not going to see any return out of. So
right, and
which
I mean,
it's hard, yeah. With the current,
I mean, there's an organization. I'm everyone know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to say the name. I'm not throwing them under the bus, but it's a good example of sponsors reneging. They do this, and when you don't get the viewership, and you know, as athletes and as fans too, we're also fans. Probably we're the biggest fans right now, right? We want to see this.
No matter how unwatchable it is.
Seeing the money come in and seeing athletes getting paid is, in my opinion, one of the greatest achievements in my time in the sport. And you know, like I said, I started competing in 2008, and I want to see more. I want to see the athletes start getting compensated for the hard work, for the show, for the, you know, the entertainment value, everything. It's so important. Like, I can't stress that enough to our listeners. Like, it's so important that we get people in and start watching these shows.
Yeah, which is why Rogue is like so important. If people always ask, like, because everyone complains about like World's Strongest Man not being live streamed, and people are like, well, like on Christmas Day it gets 2 million concurrent viewers. that is great, but Rogue routinely does these shows that get millions of views. That like sponsors will actually cough up a decent amount of money to have 1,000 people see. I mean, 1,000,000 people see their logo over the span of a few months. They'll do these things that like I think sometimes like Rogue has the best structure because I've seen with CrossFit games, like literally, I would say before CrossFit, I think Reebok, no one cared about Reebok as a shoe or anything. And now because of CrossFit, Reebok is like one of the most profitable shoe companies out there purely because they sponsor CrossFit and that's what they're like known for. So there are these ways of, I think, and it is still like, I think very much strongman's in its almost adolescent phase in a way of like, there's still very much like old school ways of thinking about certain things.
They're very developmentally delayed.
Oh, yeah, it's a state of arrested development. Realizing,
sorry, I had to throw that in there.
That's true because I think
because they're only 45 years old.
That's true. Okay, yeah, I was like, it's a long adolescence. But it is funny when people always like talk about this. Like, I think it is great if we can see that ramp up in pay that's been occurring, as long as that keeps going consistently. Because it's funny a lot for the longest time, people are like, I don't know if there's money in like women's strength sports. And it's like every top CrossFit woman out there is just killing it social media wise. Like you can be not even like super competitive, but win enough money from shows and sponsors that like you can just make a living just being like Danny Spiegel and stuff, which is a dope life.
She's an exceptional.
She's exceptional.
I mean, what she makes.
well, I mean, I'm not trying to say like she's exceptional. Like, I mean, she is an exceptional athlete, but she's an exception. Really, is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. I think to the rule, because she's one person that's doing really extraordinarily well. But I think that is a good point. Like we bring up sometimes. I like to throw CrossFit for like weight class strongman because they're actually making money in strongman in CrossFit. They get the exposure. The women especially are getting a lot of exposure. And the point is that there are opportunities out there. And anybody that may argue that, you know, I think in strongman, sometimes weight class athletes get, this isn't a pun, but they get the short stick. You know, they get the short end of the deal, but you look at CrossFit and they're lighter weight athletes who get a lot of exposure. So it's not a matter of like being your weight class. I think sometimes the location or the sport that you're in can really make a big difference on how successful financially you can be. But I mean, strongman's a big person sport.
It is,
and the biggest and the strongest are going to get the most. They're going to get the spotlight.
Yeah, and I think you're right too on that. And I was just going to say that, like, you know, we don't, as women in strongman, we don't appease, I don't think, society's view of what even a female athlete should look like. And that's just not, you know, that's just not like me with short hair and you know, being broader and muscular. I mean, just across the board with any of the women. And I think, unfortunately, maybe that may be, I don't want to say a downfall of for, you know, for us in the sport. I mean, but it's just, you know, like some of the comments that we get, you know, after we compete or when we put up videos, I would doubt that, you know, the CrossFit girls get. I mean, they probably get some, just because there's always going to be those people out there that think that a woman should be barefoot in the kitchen, you know, pregnant, holding a kid, just cooking dinner. You know, but we don't, like I said, we look different.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that may be, that may work against us a little bit.
I think if it's managed well, though, like there's enough, as someone who's like just really into like obscure metal bands and everything, we're a big enough world now that like you can find 100,000 people who are into almost anything. Of like, you can literally like, I went and saw a band where they just like dress like goblins and sing about goblins. That's all they do. And like hundreds of thousands of people will see it. Like, so I think it's that focusing on getting the audience and having people out there, because like watching what you do and like watching the weights the women have consistently put up has been incredible to see, like as the stakes are climbing and stuff, like seeing what you've done in Inez when she was on the show and stuff. I think it's only just starting to ramp up. And I think if we can break out of this mentality that like it's a small world and like there's not that many people who are interested, it's like with the internet,
8 billion people on
yeah.
this planet.
Instead, like we do this thing where, like Darren did a thing a while back where like there's 15,000 strongman athletes who compete, and like that's what we think the market
US.
share is in the US. But like we act like that's the market cap is like those 15,000 people, and it's like there are families, there are people out there like there's unlimited TV and stuff. But I think it's like trying to like get like your face in front of more people and stuff of like people need to see what you do, because like at the end of the day, like it is 2023, like people are doing more and more non-traditional things. Like you have people who their whole job is being podcasters, which isn't like a real job, like, or wouldn't have been even a
it's
decade
really
ago.
odd to me though, actually.
Yeah.
From like, you know, there's always going to be assholes out there. It doesn't matter. And I mean, and the internet is full of them, right? And they've got to go on everybody's channel and tell them that their gym lift was a no lift, and you know, and whatever else. So you're never gonna
Glenn in your mom's basement, whatever.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, ignore the fuck out of those guys. They're irrelevant. But it's odd to me at the same time because society, Western society in general, for centuries has celebrated strong women in various ways or another. I mean, Joan of Arc is a perfect example, the warrior woman. And so it's odd to me that there's any kind of stigma to women being powerful and strong. I think you just have those assholes out there that are they're gonna troll just to troll because they have shitty negative lives, right? But I think at the end of the day, getting back to what John says, marketing, getting the right people marketing can change perspective in a big way. I mean, you go back to like the 1930s, I think Edward Bernays, who's considered the father or of modern marketing, he changed the entire country's perspective on women smoking in public, right? By using positive marketing techniques. So it's possible to really get a big crowd of people behind strong women. It's going to take the right people, right? The people that have the drive. And I mean, that kind of goes to the sport overall too, getting money in. That money is there. The NFL rakes in something like $14 billion a year in endorsements, right? The money's out there. It's going to take the right people and the people with the incentive and the persistence to go and bring that in, right? So given time, hopefully, I mean, we've seen, you know, again, I'm going to shout out Anthony Furman and TJ Stodacker. I think I said his name right for once. You know, those were two people that had that passion for strongman and did, you know, I think they will have a very long lasting impression on the sport. And so we need more people like that. I'm not that person, you know, but I would like to be, right?
Yeah.
I've dreamed about that a long time, but that's not me. But yeah, I think it's possible. It's always possible. Right.
Because I think you just have to get your face in front of like the right person, because in the end of the day, like your story is like a really, really impressive one. Like to see the kind of lifts you've done, and like more and more of like even like Tamara Walcott, like she's a very non-traditional woman who's now been on like Ellen, and there are like more and more people looking at strength sports because like I think they finally see what the capacity is there, because for the longest time there have been these like artificial like limits about certain things of like seeing, what was it, Gabby Dixon do like this, beat a bunch of the men doing the Hercules hold at World's Strongest Nation. Like people see
on
the same
weight
like,
too, right?
The same exact weight,
same
which was crazy.
Weight.
She beat Martinez Lisi's like using his exact technique, and you're like, that's crazy. And I think we've had a long period of arrested development where for some reason the sport was like, I don't know if we should care about 50% of the market share in this country. And you're like, wait, 50% of this country is a huge market share. Like that's the same, like we shouldn't shout out the tobacco companies, but like realizing that like marketing to half the country is probably a smart idea. Like if you can get women smoking in public, like you can sell cigarettes. supplements. And like, this is a much healthier thing, like get women into strongman, but like get this idea out. And I think it's still just slowly developing. And I think we're just starting to see the growth curve of it, because at this point, like I would say in the past 45 years, like only in the past decade, like since I've been really interested in strongman, has like even the top guys, they've started to like make money off YouTube and everything. Like Brian Shaw and like Hathor, they make over $500,000 a year on just YouTube alone.
Yeah, it's
crazy. Like that is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can start giving back and stuff, like that is like when I told Darren some of the money that they make on YouTube, he was like, I guarantee you they've made more money off of YouTube than probably most of their strongman stuff otherwise.
Yeah,
and that's just
obscene.
Like, so I think we're at the start of something. So I like where things are going, like as far as the women's sport of like, you're just dominating everything and stuff. Like, and I think the 700 pounds will fall, because I just saw Lucy Underdown. She just did like, what was it, 672? Looked pretty smooth. Well,
that was the pressure I was alluding to early on, right?
Oh yeah,
700.
Yeah. I was like,
no pressure.
Yeah, but it is like, I think we're just starting to see this cap and stuff of like, I think the main thing is like, we've talked about it before, like there just aren't enough women doing the open classes to have created like the competitive environment needed to like a rising tide carries all ships. And like, I think we're just starting to get larger women's shows in general and stuff. Because for the longest time, it was this idea of like, can we get 10 really strong women in the same room to compete was like a challenge. And now more and more, I think that as things will progress, like you have a high level show like the Arnold Strongwoman Classic. Like if the women come to like the Rogue Invitational, that's another huge show. It's like big market share. So I think there's a lot of potential. So I'm very optimistic. I also, because I'm just recovering from being sick, I'm just optimistic about the world in general, because nothing's worse than being sick for a week and then finding out you're allergic to amoxicillin, which is what they gave you to make you feel better. You're like, it's not great. So I'm just optimistic about the world in general, right?
Yeah, and I definitely think you're right. A lot of good points.
Yeah.
It's like the old saying, change takes time.
It does.
At the end of the day, it does. And I mean, we'll see where it goes, But yeah, I'm hoping for a bright future too for us and just for the sport in general.
Like, so what shows do you have lined up? Because you have the Kaos Classic, like that's going to be a big deal, but that's kind of like a one-off, like one lift.
Yeah.
Focus on that. Like, so what's your next plans look like?
Well, we'll see. I'm throwing the idea of doing ASW. I'm throwing that idea around again. I don't like to do contests that are too close to each other. So if I don't have, a good 8 to 10 weeks to prep for a contest, then I won't even bother doing it. And for me, it's because that's about the range where I can fully recover and come back and be 100%. And for me, I if I'm going to go out and compete and put all that effort in, I want to be at 100%. So we'll see about that. I was invited to World's Strongest Nation this year. So
nice.
That's going to be real awesome.
Yeah. I don't know who has all been invited from the US, but I was invited to that. So more to come on that contest. So that's a plan. But for the rest of the year, I think that's probably going to be about it. There's a lot of people pushing for me to do OSG this year. But I don't know. The crappy thing is that, several of those larger contests, they fall right within like a month of each other.
Right.
And so again, either I could be this person that hits every single contest because I'm a pro and that's what pros do, or, I'm selective on what I do and perform at my best, which is what I have chosen to do. So, we'll see, and things can change as time goes on. But for now, it's really the only things that are plans that are solidified would be the deadlift attempt and then the nation versus nation contest this year.
So when is the Strongest Nation? What's the date on that?
That is the weekend of November 18th, and that is in Liverpool, I'm pretty certain.
Right.
That's going to be awesome because it's is it the Wimbledon Live or whatever? They're like, isn't it the Giants Live Auditorium? They do a bunch of stuff there or something.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't remember what exactly the venue name is. But just from talking with like Becca and a few others that did it last year, it's just they said it's a contest like no other because you're competing, but you're competing with a team, and so it's just a different dynamic. So it's a lot more fun,
right.
than just doing a
and also in front of a massive crowd.
Yes. Yeah, that's the other thing. And I've never performed in front of, I don't think, no. I mean, none of our shows here in the US are that big, or the crowd, there's that many people in the crowd.
I'm not sure any show is as big as what they draw at those shows in Liverpool and Leeds. I think have like the biggest crowds in the world.
Yeah, it'll be an experience for sure. I've been told that you get like a walkout song. So there's a couple of walkout songs. I'm not going to let them out the bag because I don't want anybody to.
I wanted to ask. I was like,
steal my thunder, but so yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be a good experience and a good time. So
yeah, and I think it's smart to not do too many shows together. I think one of the biggest examples was, I forget which year, it might have been 2018 or 2019 that Alexei Novikov did way too many shows and didn't perform very well by the end of the year. And then he took time off, came back and won World's Strongest Man in 2020. I'm pretty sure was the one he won.
Just 20.
Yeah. So I think there's merit to that because a part of it is like at the end of the day, unless like the pay was crazy and stuff, like you're not like, it's one of the things, the biggest lesson that it's a great video. Juji Mufu, when he quit his job to pursue YouTube or being a strong person full time, he didn't do it until he was actually losing money by doing his day job. He was like, he got to the point where he said he was losing something like $25 or $50 an hour doing his day job, that he could be putting that energy towards something else. Yeah. And at this point, I mean, now there are like those things you have to think about. Like, is it worth it doing these shows that it's taking a lot out of you and you can't be at the peak and stuff? Because at the end of the day, like, it is a hobby and everything, but at the end, like, just looking at your Strongman Archives page and stuff, like, that is a legacy of being able to, like, you list the show and you just come in like the Terminator and you're just going to take first place. Like, at this point, I feel like most people would see your name on the thing and you're like, yeah, smart money's on Victoria Long.
That's the plan. I mean, but I think that's always the plan.
That's true. That's always the plan for everyone. But like, very few, you have that Andrew Clayton quality of just being like, if you're there, you're going to win the show. Like, smart money would.
Don't jinx me. Don't jinx me.
I know. I won't jinx you, but he has a point though. He'll just announce it. He's like, this is what I'm doing. And I think you have that quality. So I think it's always good. And I think, especially the World's Strongest Nation, like, that got so much interaction online and like got so much interest. I think that's huge because at the end, like, that's the spirit of Strongman. It's just putting on a fun show, lift really heavy stuff and like get a show out there and stuff. Like, if you're just going for that old timey like circus thing, because it's impressive to see and it brings new eyes, and it does have that thing of like those wow moments, like watching the internet react to Gabby Dixon past like a minute or something on the Hercules hold with the men's weight. You have like Kevin Ferris could barely last like 30 seconds or something, and you're like, that's impressive to see people do that. So that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that.
I think at the end of the day too, I mean, for strong women, no matter what, you start breaking limits and setting these huge records that nobody thought was possible previously. People are going to start paying attention no matter what, right? There's a point where people are going to start watching regardless. So you keep doing what you're doing. I think it's going to bode well for strong women in general.
Yeah, and that's how I can hope for. I mean, even in the short time that I've been doing it, like, I have been surprised at what we've been able to accomplish, like the women have been able to accomplish. So it's mind blowing. And it's like, I even catch myself thinking like, where's the ceiling on this? You know what I mean? Like,
there isn't one.
Right. I mean, and we're looking towards like now a 700-pound deadlift and like a ridiculous log. And I'm like, where does this end? Like, at what year? And am I still going to be alive when a woman like presses a 400-pound log? You know what I mean?
That would be insane.
Yeah.
That would be insane.
Yeah. So it's I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
And it can happen. That's the reality. That's I say sports in general, but I think it's very noticeable in strength sports. Every time there's a barrier that's hit, it just encourages everybody else to try to beat that barrier. Because like with men, like the 1,000-pound deadlift barrier, even the squat barrier was thought impossible, right, in the 80s and the 90s. Then you had Benedict Magnuson pull 1,000 raw. Well, first you had Andy Bolton pull in a suit, but then you had Benedict Mason do it raw, and now you got guys like Ray Williams and say his name, Jesus. Thank you. Yeah, I almost called him Jorge. So yeah, thank you. Sorry, both with a J. I just but I mean, those two guys are squatting a grain and sleeves. So you got to have that mindset, of course, that anything's possible. But as the sport evolves and people keep breaking, women keep breaking the barrier, you're going to hit the 700. Maybe you'll hit more. Somebody else is going to push for it, and it's just going to keep going. It's just going to keep rising and rising and rising and rising. And that barrier, we don't know what the human body is capable of, because like most of those barriers all exist in the mind.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And just to be, this will sounds so cliche. Like, I hope that I can be a good example for the future strong women. But when I really think about it, to be part of it and to be somebody that, 15, 20 years down the road, like a woman that just enters, a girl, whatever, that enters this sport, is going to be able to like look at my videos and be like, that's pretty effing cool. Or to be the first woman to do something, whether it be the first woman to pull this or the first woman to press that, nobody can take that away from you. World records can always be beaten, right? And they will be. That's what records are meant to be broken. And so nobody, like the elephant bar deadlift, for example, nobody's going to remember that, or most people won't remember that I held that record, from this month to this month, this year to this year, but people will remember me if I pull this amount, or I pull, if I'm the first to do this or first to do that. Yeah. So, hopefully some firsts are in my future. Because that would be pretty freaking cool. Because nobody can take that away from me. You can pull more than I can, but
right. You will always be the first.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's kind of how I look at it.
We got a lot of time left to keep training.
Yeah, we do actually. Yeah. Like you have a lot going on and stuff. Like, so how have you found, like, what's your training like leading up to an event like that? Because you have so much time. Do you like try to break it into 12-week training cycles, stuff like that, for something like a show? Like, what's it look like leading up to, like, this deadlift one's more one-off thing, but like, how do you structure your training with such large breaks in between?
So really, it allows us to have like a trial run. You know what I mean? Like a trial run for that actual prep for that contest, which is nice. And you test maxes, even in the trial run, you test maxes, and before you go into the actual, full-fledged prep for whatever contest that you're doing. And even with, my next thing is just going to be the deadlift. I'm still training other things, because you always want to, stay current on other events, because you never know what events are going to be at the next contest you choose.
You're not going to do like Luke Davis and just deadlift 4 times a week?
No.
I love deadlifting all the time. It's
sorry.
So good.
No, that I will not do. But I'm actually not deadlifting any more than I would, in a normal contest prep, a full contest prep.
Nice.
And it's kind of what my coach and I say, why fix something if it's not broken?
Absolutely.
So we just keep rolling with what we've been doing, and until it fails us. So yeah, it's in this prep's no different. We've had a little bit of a trial run as well for this prep, prior to me starting this 10-week run. So yeah. So
your intensity on the other events and other trainings probably a little less, right? To say for deadlift days. Is that kind of, or is everything just basically the same? You're still just pushing yourself on the other training days, or?
Yeah, I mean the goal for the other events is to not lose that strength.
Gotcha.
And so I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm not doing any press maxes or anything like that. But it's just not to lose strength in those other areas because while we're focusing on the deadlift, I mean, am I when I'm not when I'm not deadlifting any more than a normal contest?
Right.
But we might push I think we'll push the deadlift a little bit more this time, just because that's what I'll be doing.
Sure.
But yeah, the main focus is just to not lose strength in those other areas.
Gotcha. That's pretty
I think
easy.
that's smart. Yeah. And too, I mean, Darren is big into like well-rounded full athlete training and stuff. Because I always complain about the fact my pressing's terrible, but I don't focus on it very much. And I just like deadlifting. And that's like, sometimes you do actually kind of have to pick, are you going to focus really on pressing or deadlifting?
Yeah, you have to focus on the shitty things too.
It's true. And I think that is like, it's going to be crazy to see what's going to happen this next year with things of like Andrea Thompson is just like her pressing has been crazy to watch.
Yeah.
To watch like your deadlift progression and like her pressing and to find out that like she's can press like 300 some pounds overhead and she's like 5'2" or something, 5'4", because she's not very tall. And stuff.
I want to say she's like 5'7" or 5'8".
Okay. I was thinking she was shorter for some reason.
No, so I don't have to like look way down at her when I'm
because how tall are you then?
Just a little bit of a
just a little
yeah. It's funny. I asked Big Laws a few weeks back. I was like, when is Andrea retiring? And he's like, she's been saying that for like 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, I mean, but that's just it. Like as an athlete, like when do you retire, quote unquote retire? You know?
Never. Right. You never say retire. Never say retire because you'll come back and do one more show.
Yeah. Well, they have master's classes for a reason, right?
They have Highland Games. That's my retirement.
Okay.
Highland Games is for us old turds. Yeah.
Focus on that throwing.
Focus on throwing.
That does make a big difference, though. Trying to think of like the longevity, and I think that makes your training sustainable. Of like, because contests do beat you up and everything. Like watching like the Stoltman brothers do tons of comps all the time. Like you can see it. Like you can see it in their performance at like the Arnold Strongman and stuff. Like
I feel like they pride themselves in Europe.
Oh yeah,
especially the Eastern Bloc guys. They pride themselves in doing as many competitions as possible. I remember Jerzy Cuddlecheek had asked me in Finland how many shows I'd done, over, I think at the time was maybe 13 years of competition. I'm like, I don't know, maybe around 50, kind of averaging 3 shows a year. And he's like, and he'd been competing maybe 10 years at that time. He's like, I've done 150. And I'm like, what? How is that possible? You're doing 15 shows a year on average?
That's crazy. Yeah, that'll never be me. I mean, I doubt we're gonna get into the high double digits for my contest appearances when I call it quits, hang it up. But that's all right. It's all good.
Just keep showing up though. You still got plenty of time.
Yeah.
Just like, and with the pool, it is like because ideally it's kind of like a double-edged sword because you want to grow the sport and like encourage enough women to get in strongman and strong women that like they won't have room for you at shows and stuff. Because ideally, if they still have room for you at shows in the next 15 years, like there aren't enough women competing there and stuff. So I think like as the pool gets bigger and stuff, because I know that was a bit of a challenge of like who do they invite for the Arnold Strongwoman Classic, because it is like it's a smaller pool of people to choose from. But I think that's going to continue to take off and everything.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's so many strong women that just haven't gotten out there yet. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why you'll never catch me saying I'm the strongest woman in the world. I don't care if I hold that title, because there's always somebody stronger, always somebody better. They just may have not been found yet. So, I mean, they're there, they're out there, so we'll see.
Yeah. There's a woman out there in the Eastern Bloc who's just like been deadlifting like 800 pounds and doesn't know it because she just like she
working,
flip over a car
on
without
a farm
thinking.
somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what so many of those people where you're like, you don't know what the weight of that is. And I think like the cap's crazy of what is it? Sandra Bradley just had the Bulgarian stone or something.
Oh yeah.
What's that thing? The 507, like as a woman who's like 181, like that was crazy. Bavarian stone lifting, I think it was.
Yeah.
Sandra Bradley. I was like, you start seeing these things. Like it's crazy. I think it's waking a lot of people up to like see these high numbers that you didn't think about.
Yeah.
And stuff. Like even at like I go to a powerlifting gym here in Austin, and one of my friends, Chelsea, she has bench nationals soon or something. She weighs like 155 pounds, and her bench right now was like 286 or something. Like she's getting close to that 300-pound mark, and like that's crazy as like a drug tested athlete to be able to think like as a woman to be able to almost press double your body weight as a bench. Like that's something that most people just dream about, like regardless of gender and stuff.
Big accomplishment there.
I can't bench double my body weight right now.
Actually,
I don't think I've ever benched double my body weight before.
That's true. That's how you know that you're a true strongman, though, because you don't know your bench. You don't focus on it. I was like, if you're really into strongman, you actually don't know what your bench press is. You occasionally do close grip bench for absurd numbers. Like you'll see people all the time. They're like just close grip bench for like 3 plates for reps, and you're like, oh, like you don't know what your bench is. That's just your accessory. Like,
yeah. The average person always asks me like, what do you bench? And I'm like, how about ask me what I deadlift?
But that's always the question. So how much do you bench? They see you have muscles of it. How much do you bench? Really? Okay, bro. I don't.
My favorite question actually is like, dude, what did you do to get so big? Like, do I really need to explain that to you?
Next.
That's true. But
awesome.
I think it's always crazy to just like see those things. And brief PSA, Darren was actually saying that like pec injuries when Hafthor tore his pec doing the bench press, like it's a surprisingly high injury rate. Like when people always talk about strongman movements having a high injury rate, you're like, that bench, unless you're like really trying to be a super power lifter, like that's a lot of strain on the human body.
Yeah.
Like,
but I mean,
that's true.
Powerlifters tear their pecs all the time.
I'm like, yeah.
I mean, like Scott Mendelson tore his on, I think, one of his world record raw attempts.
Yeah.
If you remember back in the day.
Yeah. Because when I was at his gym, like he had all the pictures of it and talking about it. As far as like meeting someone who's a crazy person, Scott Mendelson had some of the craziest training protocol stories of like anyone I've ever met of like his geared benching. Like, cause he was like, yeah, no one cared. Like people were just like said that like the shirt did all the work. So I just went out and I just did the raw record just to prove that I was still strong and everything. And he had a kilo chart for the plates, and because he had a shirt that was like, he's crazy into the equipped lifting, but his kilo chart thing literally started at 8 plates because he's like, that's what we like. That's the only number I care about. Like that's when I start counting plates on the bench. Is once it's eight red kilo plates. So all of us like when he joked about it, we're like, there's no way. And then his kilo thing, I went to like find it to someone because we had like 3 plates and a yellow on there, and I was like, what is this? And it only started at 8 plates. And I was like, okay, so we don't actually know what weight it is.
Get out the calculator real quick.
But yeah.
I'm actually doing that right now because I'm like, how much is it? That's over 1,000 pounds, man.
Yeah. I was like, yeah.
That's all I don't care about it until it's 1,066 pounds.
Yeah. Like that's
420 kilos with the bar.
Like, yeah. Because that overload, the bench training, his like him in Los Angeles, though, he was a trip, though. It was something just crazy seeing that kind of strength. But I think like those limits, people don't know what they are. Like once it starts happening of even that like 1,000-pound equipped bench club, now it's like the meets that are like how many men can break this barrier. That it's like, so it's equipped lifting is its own kind of like feat and stuff. But yeah, those pec tears, I was like, it's just not a fun movement. Like once you've started to like feel what's actual fun lifting movements are, it's like bench isn't exciting.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing like, there's not like movement. Like it's not like, I don't know. Log press is pretty cool. Or just general overhead pressing. But deadlifts really are the key. Like it's the key.
Yes.
That's like,
but Zerchers are really, I mean,
the God Emperor. Shout out, brief shout out to Manu Pescari hitting 207 kilos on a Zercher just training, which is like 5 kilos above the world record or something. 10 kilos. Yeah, which is what he said when we were talking. He's like, I'm not going to beat it by a small number. And I was like, so at least 5 kilos? He was like, no, I'm not beating it by 5 of anything. He was like 10. I was like, 10 kilos is a lot. I was like, but yeah. So it is like, it's going to be exciting to see where all this stuff goes and everything. Yeah, I feel like we talked a lot during this one and stuff. Do you have any like other stories or anything? I feel like we didn't give you as much of a platform as maybe we could.
Oh no, I don't need much of a platform at all.
Your legacy speaks for itself. You're just strong.
No, I can't think of anything that I want to talk about. Or I mean, usually people just ask me, so what's your story? Tell me where you got started. And I'm like, well, everybody knows that now. So
yeah. Like, so that's kind of what we kind of avoid on this show.
Yeah.
We like to
rarely get into people's stories.
Yeah. We like to have people on and just have good conversations. That's our thing. Yeah.
Much appreciated. It's a nice change of pace.
Yeah, that's kind of our niche, because people are like, what's your niche exactly? And it's like complaining about standards as strongman. There's too many people, and it like sometimes the sport feels cheap, like, but also just conversation of like, because that's the main thing. Whenever people ask, they're like, oh, because anytime I tell my friends we're doing a guest, they're like, how did they get into strongman? And I'm like, they've done other podcasts. Like, I guarantee it's out there somewhere.
Do some research.
Article. There's like, most people know what your first show was. Or like, what shows have you won? I'm like, there's the internet. Like,
yeah,
all of them, right?
All of them, which is crazy. Like, I think that's a very smart thing to have those selective things, and hopefully the prize pots will keep going up.
Right.
That really is, when you mention that, I'm like, $50,000 to like win between 2 shows is like, that's substantial. When like,
I mean, it's nice. Like, I don't want to make it seem like I'm not grateful for the,
it's true, but it's like,
people just, there's other things that go along with winning that 50,000.
It's true. Sure. Like, it takes all the money to get there and stuff. Like, there's a lot of like,
absolutely. I mean,
stuff.
And I'm guilty of not putting as much like into my recovery, for example, as I probably should, but it's everything that goes along with it, that the behind the scenes stuff that people don't see, that you're, dishing out money for.
Yeah.
So like you said, for that 50 grand to
be doing all that. It's an expensive hobby.
It is. It is, absolutely. So that's when people can't afford it. And they're asking like these GoFundMe, they're starting these GoFundMes. I'm like, no, it's a hobby. If you can't afford to do your hobby, then don't do it.
Right.
But
there you go. That's the best argument I've heard yet against GoFundMes.
Get me on a soapbox.
I was gonna ask. I was like, "What's your hottest take?" That's a hot take one. Because sometimes I'll get the injury thing of like, if you don't have health insurance, like that's a real bummer. To like, if it's surgery,
you should not compete if you don't have health insurance.
That's true. That's also a PSA of like, there are comp shows, there are like ways to get insurance and stuff out there, but also like. The main thing is, even if you're a professional athlete, like paying for health insurance out of pocket is really expensive.
It is.
Like for so many people, like especially now it's gone up. Like you're thinking of like 12 grand a year or $1,000 a month, like in insurance if your employer's not matching and stuff.
For sure.
So I think you're very smart about that. Of like, until eventually strongman or strong woman, like hopefully they'll start having a health insurance plan that they match.
That's one thing at a time here.
It's true. I'm like bigger prize pots, health insurance, workman's comp,
right? Retirement, everything. Just
man, that retirement, because otherwise you just have to like get really into social media. But that's the hard thing. Retiring on social media.
Right. That's the biggest thing. I don't think I can stay relevant until I'm 60.
You just need to find a good camera person. If you have like a young person at church or something who's into filming, to like just do your social media for you, that'll just be like, here's your video to post. Like, here's a compilation of this week's training. That's really what you need.
For sure. Dennis is lacking in that area, so I got to find somebody else.
It's hard though. I'm like, it's a lot and everything. but
it's hard to find. It's hard to find a good camera person.
It's true.
That's gonna charge you a lot.
That's why I say churches and universities are where you go.
Yeah.
Like if you can find a good person who's just like really into it, because some churches have like amazing camera setups, and I'm like, it's just like volunteer work. But they're like, people are just good with sound, good with this stuff. But if you don't go to church, then it's real hard to find people and everything.
Well,
so
there's a reason to start.
It's true. I'm not. Yeah, just like show up and just be like, yeah. Like that's the real frontier. People have been going to like GoFundMe for that. Just go to church and be like, my mission. I'm gonna show people. I'll wear our church logo in front of the world.
You might spontaneously combust though. We're going to church just for selfish reasons.
That's true.
You're going straight to hell for that.
Oh man!
All right, we like to try to stay about an hour, Victoria. We've over that.
Been able to stay under.
We haven't never actually managed because we have good guests on and we always talk.
Good goal.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts? I know Joan kind of already asked you about that. Closing thoughts or where people can find you on social media. Anything else you want to say to our listeners?
The follows are always appreciated, of course. One Strong B is my Instagram handle. If you want to follow me and see what I'm up to, which isn't a whole lot, but if you want to see and follow, go ahead and follow that. Don't friend request me on my Facebook, okay? That's for friends and family and all that good stuff. So, yeah. Other than that, I always appreciate the people who follow the sport and. All the positive feedback and even the negative. So thank you, trolls. Yeah, I mean, that's about it.
They're just fuel for the fire.
Right? That's right. Absolutely.
All right. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you. Great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Support us on Patreon or Anchor and find us on Instagram or Facebook.